Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live in the studio with me today, I have Melanee Hannock. Melanee is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at ALSAC, the fundraising and awareness organization for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital here in Memphis, Tennessee. St. Jude is unlike any other pediatric treatment and research facility. Discoveries made at St. Jude have changed the way the world understands, treats, and defeats childhood cancer and other catastrophic diseases. Melanee, thanks for joining me today.
Great. Well, thank you, Angela. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So part of the reason I wanted to bring you in was not only, do you work at ALSAC and you have this exciting career there, but you actually started at Hasbro and at the Walt Disney Company. So you made a big transition from for-profit all the way over to nonprofit. And, it's really one of the number one questions that I get from people is how can I move from for-profit to nonprofit, or sometimes vice versa. I'd love just a little bit of advice maybe, or your thoughts on how you were able to sort of make such a big transition.
Well, I think the first thing that I would offer is, first and foremost, if there's something you want to do in your career or somewhere you want to work, then start taking steps to get there today and learn everything that you can about the organization or the place that you want to work, whether that is for-profit or whether that is nonprofit. And the great thing about nonprofits is you can learn quite a bit about them by volunteering. And you can look for ways you can participate and make a difference and do everything that you can to prepare for how you might be the best qualified person in that organization. So the volunteering part, nonprofits are always looking for people to offer their time and lend a hand in all sorts of ways. And even at many of our events, we have dinners, we have galas, we have golf, we have fitness events. You can walk, you can run. There are all sorts of things you can do to help out. So for us and for many nonprofits, there are a number of ways that you can volunteer. And when you do that, then you can maybe find people who might be able to help you get in the door. Oftentimes, the best way to prove you're the best candidate for the job is long before you're actually doing it. And as far as for me, I was a little bit lucky getting into the nonprofit space. I was living out in California at the time and was planning to move to Memphis. And I noticed an opening for the director of e-marketing at ALSAC, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and applied online. And it looked like it was a great fit for me because my entire career had been focused on marketing for the benefit of children. And so this was really good tie between what I had done in the for-profit world with marketing and kids, and then to move over to the nonprofit world because I was looking for a way to give back a little bit more as a career. And so that's why I moved over into nonprofit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you applied online. I actually usually really discourage people from doing that, so I'm glad that worked out.
Well, like I said, I think I got lucky, and when I applied online, I actually tried to tie as many things in my background that I also knew were in the job description, because even then, that was now almost 9 years ago, there was still keyword search on your resume with basically the engines that existed then, which are much more sophisticated now.
I think that's really smart. It's really your job as the job seeker to kind of be able to explain to the new organization, like the nonprofit, what it is that you've done in the past that makes sense for their organization. So it sounds like you really took the time to not just submit your resume, but you looked at what they needed and tried to make sure that they understood that that's what you had to offer.
I did, and I did that in multiple steps. I did do that when I applied online, and then when I talked to the hiring manager on the phone, I tried to listen really carefully to what it was he was saying they needed, and taking what kinds of things I had done in my career and mapping it to what they needed and how it applied. So I tried to make as direct of a correlation as I could on the phone interview, and then in-person interviews, I tried to do the same. Or I tried to find out from the person that I was interviewing with, like what was most important to them. And then again, if there was something in my background that seemed to fit, I tried to tie it to how I had done that in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a little bit like sales when you go in and you try to figure out what's the customer, what's their sort of pain point, or what's the thing that they're really looking for. So that's smart.
Right. Yes, exactly. And at that point in time, they were looking to get more into digital, and that had been something that I had been doing, so I could try to offer up some advice, really, during the interview process about how they might be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ALSAC and St. Jude are both such important organizations. I'd love to maybe get your thoughts on, kind of what it means to you and why it's important to you, why you've been there for 9 years, like you said.
Well, I would say that it's the mission. I mean, why I work there is the mission. It's an honor and a privilege to serve the mission of ALSAC, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And what I didn't know when I interviewed for the role, but I know now, is that St. Jude is special. I knew about St. Jude, of course, before I had come to work here. But I stay because of the mission. And I'm not sure if everybody really knows the history of the founding of St. Jude
I don't think
Children's
so.
Research Hospital, but it exists because of a promise that famed entertainer Danny Thomas made to St. Jude Thaddeus, the patron saint of hopeless causes, more than 50 years ago. And at the time, the struggling entertainer, he prayed, "Show me the way in life and I will build you a shrine." And after that, Danny's career took off, and he made good on his promise by founding the hospital in 1962 to tackle childhood cancer. And it was once considered a virtual death sentence. But if he insisted that no family would ever have to pay, nor would they ever be turned away due to race, religion, or income. And it was simple, but it was a profound promise to save kids from cancer, no matter who they were. At that time, equal access was a courageous stance to take during the segregated time. Danny was deeply troubled that children were dying because they could not get the care they needed. Danny also helped desegregate the city of Memphis by demanding African-American patients' families share the same hotels as everyone else. Danny was Lebanese, so to make his vision a reality and actually fund and sustain St. Jude, he founded the American Lebanese Syrian Associated Charities, ALSAC, in 1957, and with the help of all Americans, particularly those of Lebanese and Syrian descent, to say thank you to the United States and God for the opportunity to come to this country and make a life. ALSAC was founded on the principle of the Good Samaritan, which are written into the operating documents of our organization, to love and care for our neighbors regardless of color or creed. Today, ALSAC has united millions of people from every background to support St. Jude and our mission of finding cures and saving the most vulnerable people in the world, our sick children. And Danny's legacy continues today. St. Jude is leading the way the world understands, treats, and defeats cancer and other life-threatening diseases. Families never receive a bill from St. Jude for treatment, travel, housing, or food, because all the family should worry about is helping their child live. So our mission has been the same from day one and is highly focused to find the cures and help save children everywhere. Everyone who works here knows what's at stake in our efforts and is committed to working together to achieve our founder's vision that no child should die in the dawn of life. We believe that children deserve a chance to grow up and enjoy the special milestones in life. As such, we put the mission at the center of everything we do and empower our employees and millions of supporters and partners to work together to help the most vulnerable in our world, sick children. So as far as what I like about it, that's simple. It answers the question, why for me? Why work? Why are we here? For me, it's to be instrumental in the service of others, and I get to do that every day through my job.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think it's really helpful that you kind of were able to really elaborate on sort of the background. First of all, I mentioned a lot of people approach me about St. Jude. They're really interested job seekers, and it's because of sort of that higher reason to go to work, that important reason. But also, when I have been out, whether I'm traveling or, I'm meeting people and I talk about that we have this amazing hospital, and I will mention sometimes that the cost, that it's no cost to families, which you mentioned. And oftentimes the person I'm talking to will say, "Are you sure about that? I'm not really sure. That doesn't sound quite right." So it's really nice that you're able to kind of like reiterate again. It's such not only a great mission, but it removes kind of that worry from the financial burden from the family, which I think is really, really cool. So I appreciate that. The other thing it makes me think of is, I had heard about the hospital for such a long, long time, and I knew it was really great. But a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago or so, I got a chance to actually tour it. And I can't remember if I was with you. I think I might have been with one of our mutual friends. And it was such an amazing experience. I think to see it in person, it made such a big impression on me because it was no longer just this idea of this really great place. The first thing I noticed was the ceilings. In the place where I was at, the ceilings looked like clouds or something. And there were like these wagons that the kids rode in. And, it was one thing I had heard about this amazing hospital. I knew about it. But to be there and to actually see the level of detail, it was just incredible. So...
Well, yes, that's true, and we encourage anyone to definitely come down and take a tour.
Oh, are there tours open?
There are tours. You can come down and you can contact us and we can set one up. Or they do have tours as well. They're just traditional tours where you can come and see the hospital. But it is true. It doesn't. I do hear that often. It doesn't feel or seem like a hospital because it's kind of a cheery place. It has artwork on the walls. It does have clouds on the ceilings, and
right.
And kids are going around in wagons, and so it's a place of hope. It doesn't smell like a hospital really either. So you definitely have to come and experience it.
Well, I think the reason that people are really drawn to want to work there and to want to work for ALSAC and help with the fundraising efforts for St. Jude, like I said, it has to do with feeling like you're doing something that is important, and it ties back to things that are important to you. And in general, I think often when we are attracted to a nonprofit, that's the reason. That's often the reason. So I'm kind of curious, you talked a little bit about how you were able to make a jump from for-profit to nonprofit. Now that you've been there for, like you said, 9 years or over 9 years, I'm curious if you might give us a little bit of feedback on the difference between actually working in a nonprofit and a for-profit.
Yeah, sure. I can definitely do that. Well, I would say that if you're an employee, there are really two lenses or views to think about. There's the external view looking in and the internal view of how real work gets done. And so from the external standpoint, the main difference that we've already talked about is the reason. What's the reason you do the work that you do? For the profit space, the end goal for most organizations might be, increase shareholder value, and by doing so, many for-profit organizations deliver great things to the world. Mm-hmm. They may have a product that enriches someone's life or saves someone's life, or just makes their life better in some way. Mm-hmm. But maybe the reason why they do it is a little bit different versus a nonprofit. And I think that another difference, too, is that in nonprofit, people are usually doing something for free, like giving their time, mm-hmm. Versus in for-profit, usually, they don't. Like you get paid for it. Mm-hmm. And so in the nonprofit space, you have to continue to bring people along with you. Mm-hmm. So the soft skills of collaboration and everyone working together are some skills that are probably more needed in the mm-hmm. nonprofit space, and that would be one of the differences mm-hmm. between the two. Although I would say in the for-profit space that also is needed, but probably just not used as much.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I think there's often a perspective or perception that nonprofit and for-profit are just totally different. I think your example shows that they can actually be pretty similar sometimes, other than, like you said, like how you motivate people, how, those resources come to you. But sometimes the work is really similar, like.
Well, that's true. And really, when you think about it then from the internal view or perspective, the hard skills, the things that you'd need anywhere, like, for example, I'm in a marketing role. So in the for-profit space or the nonprofit space, you do have to have that understanding of business planning and advertising and creative and just generally how to roll a new campaign out to market or a new message or something like that. So those hard skills are the same. But again, it is the soft skills of how you do it that do become a factor in the nonprofit space.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you mentioned the marketing, that you're in a marketing role. And, I talk with a lot of people who in particular are interested in sort of digital marketing or e-commerce or that kind of thing. And it can sometimes be tricky in terms of where to begin because there's just not a lot of, well, maybe there's more than there used to be, but there was not a lot of education specific to it available. I mean, what tips would you have for someone who's, whether they're coming out of college or later in their career, if they've decided they have an interest in digital marketing, like where could they begin?
Well, I think there's a lot of good news here. My advice there would just simply start doing digital things. The internet, it just has transformed, of course, over the last 10 years, even over the last year, if you think about it. And it's really democratized information and learning. It's really easy to learn how to do digital things by just starting to do them in the first place. There are all kinds of free tools out there where you can set up a website, start a search account, play with social and video sites, get your own YouTube and Facebook and Twitter accounts, play with the newer tools and applications, go set up a Snapchat account, go be on Periscope. I mean, read on the trends, keep up with the latest happenings, look for opinion leaders in the space. I mean, there are tons of things that somebody can do, especially in the digital space, that are free or relatively free, that you can start to learn how to do those things. And then really that can help you get your foot in the door someplace. If you can even say you had a case study of how you did it on your own, and hey, maybe you'll be so good at it that you start your own business, and move forward from there. But definitely I would encourage just start to do it. And I wanted to say, I have to put in my other plug for the Walt Disney Company, because one of my favorite quotes is from Walt Disney, which is, if you can dream it, you can do it. And so if you can dream it, you can do it. Start today.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And what I'm hearing as a theme almost there is a very entrepreneurial sort of feeling. I occasionally will talk to people that are interested in digital marketing that will say to me, I just need someone to teach me how to do it. I just need someone to sit me down and show me how to do it. And I always think if that's your mindset, digital might not be the place for you, because it's always changing. And if you aren't ready to just do it and just try it and just jump in, if that's not sort of your personality, you may always be behind with digital. So I think it's really smart to say, don't wait, just try.
Well, I guess I would say that's true definitely in digital. That's probably true in general. I mean, if you want to do different things with your career or even in your life, you do have to take the steps to just try and to just do it. And I guess the other thing I'll say about the internet is that if you don't know how to do it, you can probably either ask Siri or go on Google or one of the other search engines and type in your question, because more than likely there is some advice out there that will help you to learn how to do the thing you want to do. And there's quite often also a video that tells you how to do it. So it's not really as hard as you might think.
Yeah, I feel like the community is very open, and there are a lot of universities even now that are putting some of their educational content online. So there's just so much more available. But one thing that you mentioned also in your answer was if you have a case study that you can kind of present when you talk to people. And at least for me, when I started a career in digital, I did some volunteer work. So I went to some nonprofits, and at the time they were nonprofits who maybe didn't have a Facebook page yet, or who didn't, it was still really new. And I said, I'm here, I can donate my time for you or to you, but what I really want to do is I want to work on your Facebook page and your strategy. And if you'll let me do that, I will do it for free. I need some practice. I need something to put on my resume.
Right,
So.
You're right. And there are still many opportunities, probably with much smaller nonprofits that are just getting up and running, or new ones, new nonprofits where they would need help getting that set up. So there are lots of potential opportunities there too, I would say.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes people are hesitant to ask to even volunteer their skills because they're like, oh, I'm so new. But especially for a little nonprofit, they need everybody on board that they can get. So you'd be surprised at how open they can sometimes be at letting you try new things, or just, test out whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever you're interested in. They very well might support you in that, as long as you can figure it out on your own, and get their guidance, get their sign off on the messaging and whatever. But it's really nice. And I think once you've kind of gotten a few of those on your resume, a potential employer, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, they can see your case studies, so to speak, and they can maybe be more comfortable, to talk with you.
Well, they can be. And if I put on I interview lots of people for jobs all the time. One thing that comes across as very impressive, at least to me, when I do have someone looking for a job, and the thing that might put someone over the top, if you have two candidates who are equally qualified in the hard skills or the things they might have on their resume, the one that has taken the extra steps to go above and beyond might be the one that would stand out more, because they took the initiative to go the extra mile or do something more. Because when they're interviewing and when they're coming and looking at a job, if they've done that for the interview, they may be more likely to do that when they are an actual employee.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think it shows passion, and if it's with a nonprofit, it maybe shows that they have a similar value set, or that they really are going to want to get up in the morning. The other thing I find interesting about that is I will often work with people on their resume, like job seekers, and very often people actually sometimes have that experience, the volunteer experience and the above and beyond, and they sometimes leave it off because they assume it's not relevant because it wasn't part of their paid job. So I'll sometimes help them to see what else could we add on, because maybe they are doing a lot of really awesome, great things that could add to their resume, and they're not necessarily highlighting it because they assume it's not important. But you just talked about why that it helps you to know what else they're doing.
No, I agree. Actually, I think it's very important, because you are hiring someone to do a job, but you are hiring an entire whole human being, that has interests and other things that they do in their free time. And so I think that it is important to understand the whole person. When you're interviewing someone and when you're the person seeking the job, it's important to make sure that it's a good fit for everybody.
Absolutely. So speaking of the whole person and talking to people, networking is often a pretty important part of sort of the job search process. And I'm kind of curious for you, what, role does networking kind of play in your own career progression that you've made?
Well, I think networking has been critical in my personal and professional life. It's funny though, but I never really thought about it as networking. I'm a naturally curious person, and so I'm probably almost accidentally networking, if that makes sense, in that I reach out to people who might be doing something that I would like to do or would like to learn more about how to do.
Right.
Or they may be people that I just might work with on a regular basis, but have more things that would enrich my life as well as theirs. And so it doesn't really feel like, I guess, the word networking, which sometimes we don't take as a good word.
So sometimes people do perceive networking to be negative because it seems very transactional. It's,
Right,
I want to get
exactly.
something from you.
Right.
And, there's two parts of it. You really want to go into networking. Like, you really made a point when you said, I'm not networking to network. Like, I'm naturally curious
Right.
and I'm going to learn something. And I think of it like making new friends. And
Exactly.
you have
Okay.
to be open to it,
Right.
But what you don't want, which I do find that some people perceive networking to be, is that they look at it like, well, I only want to talk to you if you can help me find a job, or I only want to talk to you if you have a job right now.
Right.
But people don't want to hire you the first time they meet you,
Right.
and they don't want to be used.
Right.
So if your only reason for talking to someone or for meeting someone is to get a job, you've missed the point.
Right.
I mean, I think I met you initially at like a startup kind of event or something.
It's probably
possibly.
true.
You know? And I really am a very curious person too. And I think it was sort of a technology sort of startup type deal. And I've stayed in touch with a lot of people from that time.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I still know a lot of people from that time. And as I've moved around the country, and now I know people in multiple cities.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So that becomes important too, because then it's like you have people in lots of different places.
Right, right.
And actually, as I've progressed in my career, so have many people that I've known when I started my career.
Yeah.
And so they've progressed in their companies too, and it's fun to actually watch them grow in their careers all across the country with all sorts of different organizations. And so it's not necessarily really like networking.
Yeah.
It's more like these are people that I've known for a long time, have been curious to know, and learning from, and vice versa. And so it's more like, I don't know, a network of growth.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the thing that's neat about networking, especially when you're younger, is often you don't know where everyone's going to end up. And that's when they end up in different cities and different careers, versus, at least for me, as I've gotten older, my networking has been more and more targeted. So I may be looking for people who are, marketers that are a similar professional level as me, that we can compare notes. Versus when I was younger, maybe I was just looking for someone who was curious and smart and interested to do new things. And that's where, as they grew in different directions, versus now the growth has already happened. So you kind of know what you're getting. So it's kind of an interesting thing to kind of compare, at least for me, in the past versus now.
Well, that's true because, right, if you're up and coming in your career, you can network within your peer set and also ask for a mentor or, and bring value to that mentor too. If you have one, definitely make sure you're using their time well as, they're trying to help you grow or learn or make connections or whatever that is.
Yeah. So when you first moved to Memphis and you were looking for networking groups and you were kind of deciding where you were going to spend your time to meet new people, what did you look for in a networking group or in an activity?
Well, I followed what I was passionate about. And so I did start to become involved in the Memphis entrepreneurial community because I was passionate about that. I had a background in marketing and digital. I love digital technologies and how things are growing. So I started to get involved with the startup community in Memphis. And just naturally, because of that, it was more of a blend of what I was passionate about professionally, both marketing and digital, plus St. Jude and kids and giving back, with what I was interested in personally, which also happened to be many of the same things. And so I met kindred spirits, really, of people who liked the same things that I did. And so, it just naturally worked out. So that's how I pursued what I was passionate about with like-minded people.
I think that's perfect. And I often as I talk to people, I encourage them to kind of look for that. Where do your interests lie, and kind of pursuing those things, because that is where you're going to find like-minded people. And that's where it's going to be more comfortable for you.
It'll probably be where you're most happy as well. So
Absolutely.
All of that gets combined.
Right. And I think the more you like what you're doing, like the fact that the things that you enjoy at work are similar to the things that you enjoy at home, the more that those kind of line up, the easier it is to be successful. I would say it's not such a fight. Well, that kind of actually leads me to my next question. And it's funny because, now that we're kind of in a new year, I've been getting a lot of questions on this topic lately. And it's kind of surprised me. A lot of people have been coming to me and saying, Angela, I really like my company, but I feel like I want to get a promotion. How can I get a promotion? I've gotten more of those questions in the last month than I've gotten in the last couple years combined, which has been a surprise. But I wanted to ask you about it because you've been very successful within both your organization and other organizations. And I think just at ALSAC alone, you've had 4 different roles in, your 9 years there. And so, a lot of people really struggle to sort of feel like they're getting recognized and to understand how they can, be promoted, because sometimes people leave companies just because they can't figure that piece out. So I just love some advice for those of us who may be looking for promotion, who may be looking to figure out that internal piece.
Yeah, sure. This happens all the time where I have conversations with people about, first, really, I encourage people, what do you want to do with your life? And then how does your career fit in with that? And you have to map those 2 pieces to where you want to go in your career. And then ultimately, what kind of promotion do you want? And then once people figure all of those pieces out for themselves, it really boils down to 2 things, I think. One, definitely work that out with your boss. If there are things that you want to do that are the same or different than what your current role is, that are going to help you get to the next level, then start identifying what those things are for yourself and with your boss, and then work on a plan together as to how you might be able to do that. And my recommendation on that would be have a conversation with your boss and then put a plan together as to how you might be able to get there. But there is the second piece of it, which is if you're really interested in something, take the steps to learn, take the steps to grow, take the steps to know what is going to create value for somebody. Because if you're making someone else's job easier, if you're providing something that they need, they're more likely to promote you because you're already either doing that job or you're already solving problems that either currently exist or you're being proactive that they're coming, and you're already creating solutions for it, which creates some kind of value. Once you do that, getting promoted is almost the easy part. I know that sounds funny, but it's more like just keep pursuing things that are going to make the world, I guess, better, but also your workplace better. And then those opportunities might manifest themselves.
Well, what I like about what you said is it sounded like partnering with your boss and coming up with kind of a plan.
Right.
And not waiting on someone else to tell you what to do.
That's right. Well, I say this, I don't know if this is a quote from someone else or not, but the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so the more you can keep the balls for your career in your hands and take steps to do that, the more likely you'll get where you want to go. If you wait for someone else to identify those things for you, you might wait a long time.
Absolutely. And a lot of the people that I talk to, they've reached a real frustration level where they want to go into their boss and say, I want this right now or I'm leaving. And it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is start early. Don't wait until you're super frustrated and do more than what you do today. Because I do talk to people pretty often who they want to go in and maybe ask their boss for like a 30% raise to keep doing the same job. That's a tough sell. I can't imagine why someone would want to give you 30% more for nothing different. What I'm hearing from you is reaching and growing and movement. And then the other part, the promotion and the money or whatever, will come naturally with that movement.
I think that it can. I would say that probably currently, as well as prior to being in my current role, most of the time when I got promoted, it wasn't in the role that I was in. Mm-hmm. It was in a role that I saw needed to be, and I worked with a team, perhaps, but I worked on identifying what that gap was, and then that gap is something that you might have the skill set to do. And sometimes that's a pathway to a promotion that might be faster than maybe the path that you're currently on. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that makes sense. I can give you specific examples.
Sure.
When I was, I'm not sure, 22 years old, maybe 23, I was at a company where I saw the need for them to do more marketing. Mm-hmm. And so I just put a plan together and proposed it at the time it was a small company, to the CEO of the company, and said, hey, you could probably do all these things if you wanted to reach out to a different audience or different something. And I proposed the plan to him. Without being asked to do it, I just thought he might want to consider it. Well, he did consider it, so much so that he actually gave me the job, and he gave permission to hire a backfill and found somebody to do the job that I was doing, so I got to do the new job.
Wow.
So that happened way when I was a long time ago now. But that also happened even at the Walt Disney Company. That's actually how I got into being a manager and got promoted, was we identified a new business that we could get into. Mm-hmm. And I worked with a team of a couple people, and we put together a plan for how we might be able to enter that business. And we pitched that all the way up. It got funded, and then they said, hey, can you run this business? And so then we got the approval to hire the team and to do it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's just in front of you. It can be something that you might see, could be, and make it be.
I think that's great. And I mean, I think the thing that's amazing there is it's your own vision. You're getting to do this thing that you thought about and that you love. You're often the first person. So I think sometimes they're willing to cut you a little bit of slack to let you kind of figure it out as you put it together. And if it's something you created, you don't necessarily have to fight against 3-4 other candidates for the job. It was your idea, and it sounds like in those situations you were kind of given the opportunity first.
Yes, and sometimes the path to doing that is identifying something new. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when there's something new that could be an opportunity, that's an easier pathway to create. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've covered a ton of different topics, and I mean, your career, it's really inspiring. I think it's going to be super helpful to our listeners. We've covered a lot of different things. Is there any other sort of advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with today? Is there anything that we didn't remember to cover?
I think the biggest thing is just, again, getting started today. Mm-hmm. Like the earlier you can start with, hey, either you love what you're doing, you want to do more of it, and what are those steps to do that? Mm-hmm. Or if you don't like what you're doing and you want to do something different, what is that? And then take the steps to go do that. Or if you're sitting there and you're wondering, well, why in the world hasn't this other person fixed this thing that I completely see broken? Well, if you have a suggestion about how to fix it, send it on, because
Right.
most people are looking for the person who might have the answer about how to fix something that they either might not even know is broken, or might know is broken, they don't know how to fix it. And if you're the person that comes up with how to do that, you will be listened to, if it's a good solution. So just get started.
Absolutely. That's excellent advice. Well, so if we're listening today and we'd like to learn more about ALSAC or St. Jude, where should we go?
Well, the best place to go is a website. So go to stjude.org. And there are many ways to get involved with the mission, some of which I said in this podcast. Sign up for one of our walks, our marathons, fitness events, volunteer. There are lots of ways to become involved, and most of that is on the website at stjude.org, so you can go there.
Great.
We're in social media too, so Facebook and Twitter, you can follow us if you want to learn more about the things that are happening.
Yeah, and these volunteer opportunities, they're happening all over the place, right? It's not in one particular city or state.
No, they're all over the country. We have events pretty much in every state, and so you can go online there too and go and look up events and go do a search for your state.
Oh, that's great. Well, Melanee, thank you so much for taking the time today.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher so you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.